Of my 30-year working career, I've spent all but 2 years in aviation. So did a brief stint in the industrial world, which is very well spent. It was nice to get a different perspective, learn how different business models work, how it differs and how it's similar to aerospace. But what I did also learn through that is that my passion is in aviation, and it was always calling me back. So I ended up coming back to the industry, learned a lot from being outside of it, but took some of that learning to my benefit here in aviation.
And from when you started to now, and what you're focusing on now, are there any huge differences that stand out to you from just what you've learned, or maybe how the industry has changed?
You know, one of the things that I learned, and again, it was a very good experience for me to step outside aviation, but one of the things that I learned is, you know, when it comes to the technical side of aviation with all the requirements, you know, the airplanes are flying, it's very safety sensitive. My assumption and what people would say is that, you know, aviation's just different. Okay. It's different than the other industries. And for the most part, that's true. But what this did teach me is that there are some other industries that are very safety sensitive as well, and very strict quality requirements, technical requirements. I mean, you take, you know, Caterpillar, you take, Caterpillar vehicles, you take tractors, John Deere, ag tractors, all kinds of equipment. And what you'll find is that the requirements really aren't that different. And doing business with them really isn't that much different than, say, doing business with a Boeing or an Airbus. Very high technical hurdles to do business with them. So that was one of the things that I took away that I think really has stuck with me.
Now, that's some similarities. I'm curious, are there any misconceptions that people might have in general, maybe not part of the aviation industry, maybe in some of those other sectors, or even just family and friends? When you do an introduction, one of the first things is, you know, who you are and what you do. And are there any common questions or misconceptions that come up? And if there are, what are they, and kind of how do you explain it?
Yeah, there are some. Certainly, you know, I think when you say aerospace, you know, some people, if they're not really too immersed in that industry, might jump to satellites and rockets.
I was going to say
that.
Like,
and, you know,
yeah.
And that's a very different industry than, say, the aviation aftermarket that I'm currently in. You know, there's, of course, just different business models and not so much government related, things like that. But I think that's definitely, you know, one of the head scratching questions that I do get in those situations.
Yeah, what I've come across in trying to explain kind of what we do on the software side is what I find people are surprised to hear is that there aren't a whole lot of brand new parts off the shelf that you can just buy for an aircraft and put on, because the industry doesn't wait typically for something to break in order to fix it. It's got different times and cycles that they go by at certain intervals. And that whole rotation is something that I find people are intrigued by. And the whole aftermarket sector is almost like news to them. Like it's not a piece that they've ever really considered. And it's like, yeah, there's no like Napa really for aircraft parts to just go get something OEM off the shelf for whatever you need. There are some things like that, but the majority is probably not like that. And so people are in my experience, they've been surprised by that, and has been kind of one of the big things I've had to talk about.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, you know, people don't realize that, you know, what happens to these aircraft that they're flying to Cancun on. You know, they're taking a trip to Europe on. What happens to them? You know, 20 years is typically their give or take, is their service life. And, after that, then they may end up cut up and with all the parts being consumed in other planes that they're going to end up flying on.
Well,
so yeah, you're right. That's a really great point. And that's not a common understanding that I think the general public has.
Yeah. And then when you see these photos, these dramatic photos of the planes or different kinds of aircraft, in their boneyard, you think, everything on that plane may have been there for the 20 years it's been in service, but no, like there's a whole area of teardown that isn't just about scrapping the entire aircraft. There's some parts on there, many parts on there that are, like you said, consumed or taken off and put right back into service or overhauled and put back into service because they have so much more life left on them. So that dramatic boneyard picture isn't necessarily what happens to the aircraft at the end of its life. Like the whole thing is just done. There's a lot of life left in those things, even though they see the airframe, and the fuselage all torn apart and scrapped. It's not all scrapped. Yeah. That's not the end of it. Yeah.
Yep.
Are there any particular projects or highlights that you would consider as maybe high impact or encouraging as part of the work you do as a whole in the industry? Well,
I think our business, which obviously is part of the Stratus Aero Partners group of companies, and that is our business. What you described is end of life cycle aircraft, really managing that to provide value to airlines, operators, our customers. I think in that value that we provide, it's essentially keeping the airplanes flying, keeping them operating. And certainly coming out of COVID, there's a lot of challenges with OEM lead times and providing OEM parts. So getting a new part is not always an option or a good option. So, I think we really look at it, you'll see a lot of taglines, keep them flying. And I think that's really the value and certainly some of the motivation and excitement that I have in, showing up every day is keeping those aircraft flying, keeping the parts on the shelf, so that we can all, take our flights to Cancun and Europe and, business trips and things like that. That's really the value we add.
Yeah, it's all over the world. I mean, in your experience in general, what would you say would separate a good aviation aftermarket professional from a great one?
First of all, I think to be a good one, I always look for character and integrity. That's something that we really hang our hat on here and how we do business and how we just do our work every day. It's important because you'd be surprised it's not always there. And that's really the first thing. But I think to make it great, whether it's a salesperson or whether, you're on the ops side or any functionality in the aviation aftermarket, is business acumen. I think that's really what sets some people apart because, to do some of these complex transactions in our business, that's important. And, we do those every day. But to really understand how do we do those transactions better? How can we be creative in doing them? And if we do so, will that be profitable or not? Or, evaluating different opportunities and looking at them, from not just a transactional scenario, but looking at them from what is the impact it's going to have on our company, on the customers, and on the market. So I really look for folks with that business acumen that can take a step back, look at a little higher level and say, this is a good decision. This is something we really need to go after.
Yeah. And having that big picture view, you're not thinking of it just as checking tasks off the list and not thinking about the big picture because there's other people. It may be, one item or one task, but it has a domino effect on so many other things, like you said, not just company reputation or company culture, but what about the end user? and being able to know we're doing a good job, not just for my own sake, but for the sake of the company and for the sake of the end user, and overall having that positive impact outlook or that lens that they see through to where, yeah, maybe they take a higher ownership in what they do, or definitely more proud of what they do and see the impact and purpose of what they do and drive it forward. And that helps the culture in the company, right? Without kind of a purpose-driven mindset like that, I could see how maybe some of the second mile to make sure things are done absolutely the right way and to company standard and go that extra mile, if that's lacking and you're just making it just bare bones basic, what is that going to set for culture? Because that could erode culture. And then what kind of legacy do you then have as a company? And so, yeah, you want that open mindset and that different lens for the next generation stepping into some of these roles or that would be interested in these roles. What do you think would be some things to work on or to focus on before ever even getting into these positions to help them achieve that mindset ahead of time?
It may not come natural to everybody. Some may have it. I think if there's any financial classes, exposure to really understand things from a financial perspective, more of a macro financial perspective, I think that's very helpful. A lot of people have that ability to comprehend that and kind of have that intuition to say, you know what, I think that's a good opportunity. I think that's something we need to pursue, but I can't quite articulate why. So I think having some of that exposure is very valuable. I'd like to add that, I mentioned the word passion earlier, and it just never ceases to amaze me, the aviation industry, how many people are in it that just have a passion for everything from seeing airplanes just flying to the wonder of flight and wondering how that 747 can actually lift off when it looks like it's just crawling along. It's amazing the passion that people have. And I mean, I see it in our organization. Certainly I have it. And I think it's a common trait within our industry, which I think is terrific.
You see that a lot in networking and some of the events we go to and connecting with people within other companies in a different specialty. But it's that same thread of intrigue, I think, that I've recognized as well. The ability to connect with people that are in different parts of the industry in an environment like a trade show or a conference, or there's lots of golf outings, there's lots of different sponsored events like that. Do you find that that's important? And do you have an idea on what makes effective networking in those situations? Is there a certain strategy you would suggest in building and even maintaining those relationships long term?
Absolutely. That's something that I strive to do all the time. The aviation industry, again, something that I learned from my industrial time spent, it's very relationship based. Okay. And I think that's a large part because there's so many requirements, even though we've gone to great lengths to document things and make sure we have good procedures. And I think the industry, by and large, is very good at that. There's still a lot of tribal knowledge, still a lot of experience that's needed to understand different concepts and requirements and things. So relationships are very, very important. And you come across working with people, some really great people, but you may be working on a slightly different area for some time and may not have any direct contact with those folks, and kind of forcing yourself, teaching yourself, reminding yourself to stay in touch, be relevant, try to help. And it could be in anything. It could be from helping folks with job searches. It could be referrals. It could be maybe trying to help someone with a problem that they have. But, try to stay in touch and be relevant.
Yeah. You never know who someone else might know, right? Mm-hmm. And so those connections can just be a path of connections that just lead to all kinds of places. We've talked about maybe some of the networking and the relationships part to kind of take it to that next level. But as a foundation to that, some of the overlapping themes that would work with any industry is the business acumen, the relationship building, and just that general passion or interest in the subject. And that as a foundation is okay to start out at. It doesn't have to be a scary thing to think about going into aviation and all the steps you have to take to get there. There are things that you can do ahead of time that, regardless of whether you go into aviation, they will benefit you anyway. So that business acumen and that big picture outlook on not just what you're doing, but how the company's doing, and how you impact that trend, and also the end user, that mindset, regardless of the industry you go into, will be highly beneficial. And then to take that to the next level would be the relationship building, finding those industry events, because they are worth it. You have to do that work in advance and build those networks in advance, so that when an opportunity comes along, or you need to reach out to someone, or you have something for someone else, you kind of have that list of contacts built up.
That's absolutely right. And I just make two comments. For one, for those folks that are looking to get into aviation, I would suggest going to a local air show. Walk around, not just watch the airplanes fly, which I think I think everybody's really impressed and amazed with, but walk through some of the supplier booths, chat with some of the folks. You'll learn everything from sales to ops to quality, and you'll really get a good perspective, and just talk with some of the people there that are in the industry and get their perspectives and feedback. I think, that's a great start. Just immerse yourself in it, whether you have the passion or not. But if you certainly, when you're sitting there watching those airplanes at the air show, I think it certainly builds passion. But like you said earlier, to add on to that, it's one of the things, again, that I learned by spending some time outside of aviation. Sales is sales. And there's different, business models, maybe some different methods, and kind of how you go about your daily work in sales, for example. But sales is sales, and it's about building relationships, and a lot of those skills that our team uses every day is really the same in any kind of industry. So I think that's certainly beneficial to learn some of those sales skills. All those different activities that can build up your business acumen is gonna run in any kind of industry that you could work in.
Can you recall a particularly challenging high pressure situation that maybe didn't work out exactly how you envisioned, but was still professional and ended up in a favorable result? What would that be?
Well, I think there's been a few. The one that sticks out in my mind that's fairly recent is we had acquired an airframe. The airframe was stuck in a very difficult place. It couldn't move, had no engines, and the facility there had no experience in doing dismantles, nor did they have the ability with hard pads and things like that. So I had to make a couple trips over there. Meanwhile, they're extremely busy with other things that they were good at, some of their core competencies. So it was really, really a challenge with me flying over there to try to not only train them, but to get in front of them, to get my project up on their priority list. It took a few times where I had to walk into the CFO's office and stand there until I got an audience. That was difficult when, you've got a deadline. You're really try to need to get something moving. And that was a couple years ago.
Did you get it out of there? And what was the...
Yep, it took 2 trips. Ultimately, we did get it out of there. It took more time than we preferred, but we did get it out of there, and it has since been a really, really successful project. But it certainly started off very rocky.
So I'm curious, how did you get it out? Did you have to truck it out of there in pieces?
Well, what happened, sort of.
Or helicopter it out? I'm just trying to envision like the most difficult spot in my mind is like on this, in some highly wooded valley or something that has nothing but maybe a logging road.
There was a combination of using very unconventional means to A, dismantle the aircraft, B, remove the landing gear, which of course when you remove the landing gear, you can't move it. And then to figure out, get lowboys, trailers to truck it out, put it to a position where it can then be cut up and then trucked out. All of that was new to this location. And actually, it was the opposite of the analogy that you gave. It was a desert location. So it was even more challenging from that perspective. But yeah, that was the most recent project that I can think of.
And I'm sure that took a lot of teamwork, and maybe was there
Absolutely.
a lesson in leadership there, or can you think of maybe it was that experience, but when it comes to teamwork and trying to lead a team, that might be a situation that shapes you professionally. Would you consider that to be one? Or is there another one where you're like, wow, yeah, that had an impact, but let me tell you about this.
Yeah, that one definitely taught me a lot in some things maybe that I could have done better or differently, mainly in how do you get people that, to want to go along with what you're trying to do when they're maybe not incented to do so, at least immediately. Taught me a lot in how to talk to them appropriately, get the right audience, and how to maybe motivate to get that done.
And I'm sure you're proud of that. What is something that you would consider most proud of? Maybe an achievement or a milestone that maybe even rises above that particular example.
Yeah.
What would it be?
So I really take a lot of pride in how I manage our team and the people that work for me and for Stratus. I take a lot of pride in that. And a lot of it goes to building a strong culture, building a culture of integrity, but a culture that strives to get results. And I think when I look at that and how I interact with the team, how I motivate, how I try to get everybody working to the same sheet of music, I take great pride in any feedback that I get that's positive. And about a year or so ago, I got a letter from a former employee that was very complimentary in how I had managed a few different situations and this individual. I'm very, very proud of that. And it's not because was a pushover or anything like that. We had difficult challenges that we worked through. And to me, when people recognize and respond to your method of leadership, that's very rewarding for me. And that's something that will stick with me.
If you had some advice for the younger you, what would it be? Or if not you, some other younger person that maybe is looking ahead and seeing what their outlook is?
I think the biggest thing is stay true to yourself. In your career, in my career, and in everybody's career, you're going to have situations that you're faced with where there's going to be a choice. And you can go one path or the other. And we all make mistakes. We've all been there. But once you choose that path, stay true to your convictions. Do so because that's what you believe, and do so with character, but stick with it. If it doesn't turn out, there will be another opportunity. Stay true to what you believe and how you really view situations. I think if you're compromising your character and your integrity, there might be a short-term gain, but I think the damage will last.
Yeah, it's great advice. And I want to talk about further into the future and ask if there's a process or maybe a technology or a train of thought or rule of thumb that you might see in the coming years as reshaping or helping to redefine the landscape or even operational practices of aviation aftermarket companies? What's way far down the line that you think, yeah, this might have a big impact here?
I think the thing that sticks in my mind is we all have our phones. We can simply go in there, do a search for what we want, press a button, place an order. If it shows up, it's wrong, we hit a button and we get a barcode printed off and we can drop it off and it gets returned. And for the most part, it's wonderful technology for all of us. I mean, I use it all the time. Millions of people do. I wonder if and when that same mode of buying will transition into the aviation aftermarket. I think there's been a few attempts by some other companies that have tried to kind of create an Amazon-like website where you just go in and you click and buy right off of the website. I always wonder if that's really going to... I think that's where the industry's going. How soon it's going to get there, it's hard to say, because I'll go back to our discussion about relationships and how complicated the products are, how there's really rarely an apples to apples situation. And, you have to talk about the different aspects because different tags, different, mods and things like that. There's different valued parts that can be used in different situations. And will there be a point where that human interaction is kind of moved out of the process? I personally like the relationship aspect because you want to make sure there's no misunderstandings, regardless of the outcome. And a lot of times you need somebody to explain that. But I think that's really the biggest thing is, will technology, be it AI or some of the technologies that you have, bring us to that type of buying mode, and if so, when?
Yeah, and I've noticed, like many industries, aviation is big on the negotiation, right? So you got to have that negotiation aspect of it too. And then, even operationally, I know that there are so many things operationally that technology can solve for maybe better accuracy or productivity or just kind of eliminating the human error. But that doesn't mean you throw out the entire human. There are some things that, to your point, would be considered, almost necessary, indispensable aspects to the relationship and human component that you just won't get in any other method. So we're going to wrap up here pretty soon. As part of closing, I wanted to ask you if there's any message or any takeaway you'd like to leave with anybody who might be listening to this, maybe opportunities or upcoming projects with you guys. Hey, maybe you're hiring and you want to put that message out there. Just, but hey, maybe it's an announcement. Maybe you guys have something new coming up. Just any takeaway you want to leave as we close.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just maybe a shameless little plug, but we're always working on deals for more inventory, more airframes, and we've got deals in the work now that, fingers crossed, we'll be able to publish soon. But we're always working on things. We're looking at bringing on new airframes all the time. We need those materials to support our customers and bring value to our place in the industry. So
how can anyone interested to contact you get in touch with you or your team? What's the website, email, or phone number you'd like to put out there?
Yep. The best website to start is aircollc.com, but reach out to us on LinkedIn. Any member of the AirCo team, myself directly, we monitor LinkedIn daily. So we're always responsive and look forward to any kind of inquiry.
All right. Excellent. Well, Jay, can't tell you how much I appreciate you speaking with me today. And I think our listeners will enjoy it too. And you shared some valuable insights, and I really appreciate you talking with me. So thank you for being with me today.
My pleasure. Thank you.